The time to build is upon us.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You know the greatest danger facing us is ourselves. A rational fear of the unknown.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
This is the Superhuman Academy podcast.
Okay, I hit record, so yeah, we're live. What were you saying?
I was just curious. I wanted to know more about you.
More about me. You said you were doing research. What did you
Well,
dig up?
I felt like I couldn't come up with a lot. I ended up
Huh.
listening to a lot of, different episodes of this podcast, which is really fantastic. I love this idea of pod. Now I'm drawing a blank. Pod course.
Oh, you listen to some of those too? Yeah.
Yeah, it's genius. It's a great idea. It's a great marriage. But so I think the last time when we had a really brief encounter,
Very
you
brief.
had something going on at your house and your wife was gone and the baby, I
Yeah.
don't know. And so well,
Yeah.
I'd love
Yeah,
to
we-
know my host.
Okay. Yeah, we got connected via Dan
Okay.
Metcalf.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had a pre-podcast interview booked, and then during it, I think that was when our basement was being remodeled. We had a ton of people running around the house, and
You're like, I'll be right back.
I was getting calls and texts, and it was very disruptive. And so I was like, all right,
You're like, oh, you're good.
we'll make this happen.
Did your
Yeah.
basement get finished?
Yeah, it's pretty close. I have one last little thing. I reinstalled the sink and the toilet a couple days ago,
Oh, good for you.
and I realized that the one of the old lines was corroded and messed up, and I had bought 2 replacements just in case, and I bought 2 because I don't think I've ever gone to Home Depot or Menards or any place like that without having to go a second time, and I was like, I'm anticipating it this time. I don't even know if it's broken, needs replaced, because I didn't pay enough attention when I was looking at it, but I'm gonna assume it is. I'm gonna buy 2 different versions because I don't know the sizes,
That's
and they were
awesome.
both wrong, so
No. That is just like the law of
It is.
Murphy's Law. Yeah.
It's impossible to only go to a home improvement store one time for a project.
You just need one, like, right next door that you can, like, walk to and be like,
Yeah,
"Oh, this was
I
wrong."
wish. So,
So
almost done.
so how old is your son or daughter?
Elias is 3. He just turned 3
Aw.
a couple weeks ago, which will be several months ago by the time that other people might listen to this conversation.
Yes,
But,
probably.
yeah, and I believe Dan connected us after I shared about our second son, who was stillborn earlier this year, and
Oh,
he connected us. I actually earlier this morning before this conversation, I watched the video on your website, the
okay.
Walk the Red video.
Yeah.
That brought me to tears, which I'm sure it brings a lot of people to tears. That's an intense story that you have.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me that you had a stillborn because that is just such a tender loss. And
Yeah.
it connects people with like, oh, you have seen the same thing. And it's really a hardship. Was it a son or a daughter?
A son, Leander. Yeah.
Leander. And that was this year?
Yeah, that was in May, so a few months ago. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
recording, so it's probably not the time for
Mhm.
me to ask you, how are you doing? But
Oh, you can the way that I do this is we are having a conversation.
yeah.
It's just you and me, and if other people wanna listen, then cool. If it helps
Yeah.
them, cool,
I
but
do remember you saying
yeah,
that.
I don't record for an audience.
So how
But
are you doing?
I'm feeling very strong. Jess and I've been very intentional about our processing and
Good.
um, being as present to what we're experiencing as possible
Mhm.
and dealing with things as they come up. So,
That's so smart. That is absolutely the way to do it because it's when you stuff,
yeah,
I don't want to deal with this. It comes back with a vengeance and then you
yep,
don't control when.
right.
So I'm curious, how did you know to do it that way? Is that just intrinsic to you?
No, not intrinsic, and I'm, very grateful to have I've been training and apprenticing and learning from, uh, some a small group of people who are exceptionally skilled in not just this specifically, though also this specifically, but,
Mm.
um, in being resilient, resourceful, present, healing, facing hardship, all those things have been training very intensively for the past year or so,
Mm.
a little bit longer than that. And it just so happened to be the best possible preparation that I can think of for what we've experienced. And so, yeah, I was like, um, as soon as I got the phone call from the hospital, it was like immediately, we default to our whatever's most trained. And I've been training very intensively for the last year or so, specifically for difficult situations and um, dealing with strong emotions and pain and all of those things. And so that's what I defaulted to. I went directly to that, and it's been
That's pretty
effective.
amazing. I mean, it's amazing to me that you would put yourself in a learning cube of people that are training in that. Like, most
Yeah.
people run from that. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. You're flipping the interview on me, aren't
I
you? All right.
know. I
It's okay.
realize that.
It's okay. I will get, I want to ask you some questions too, but yeah, I think I've maybe shared this in some other conversations, but I had an experience 5 or 6 years ago in which um, Jess came home one day and she shared that she had been in a very near miss with a school bus, and it just hit me. It hit
Mm,
me very hard, and I think I had never before that moment really engaged with that possibility
mhm,
of her being gone,
mm,
and suddenly with that, just and like intellectually you can think about possibilities like that, but it was the first time where it like kind of hit me like somatically. I felt like, oh wow, like I was simulating that experience and it was very vivid and real for me.
mm,
And I realized that if that had happened, my instinct was to kill myself. Like that was and I had never had suicidal thoughts or anything like that. But I realized like, oh, like in this simulation that I'm running very
yeah,
viscerally right now, that's the response that I go to.
mm,
And that shook me up a lot. I'd already been doing coaching and working with people, not on, um, not typically through like real emotionally difficult experiences, more just like coaching on improving productivity and things like that. But interpersonal working with people in all different areas of life end up getting tied into everything when you're working with people one on one. And so I was very cognizant to one, how unprepared I was for difficult life situations, and two, how doubly unprepared I was to help other people who might be
mm,
going through losses like that. And I realized I don't want that to be my response. Should that tragic event occur or something like that, I wouldn't want to double the tragedy. Like I would want my response to be strong enough and present enough to be able to support the other people who are also grieving and suffering
mm.
rather than compounding that. Like, that's not how I want to show up in the world or not show up in the world. So one
Right.
last thing I say, I can tell you've got things going in your head, but,
I'm just
um
in awe of you.
oh, well, the next thing for me was just I was like, "I don't know how to change that. I don't know how to be that person," but I started to look for that. I was like, "I have a vision of being a person who, in loss, is there to support, and I will just seek out how to become that," and that's what I did, and I found some people who showed up that way, and so I just gravitated to that. I was like, "Okay, I wanna how do you do that? What's your process? What did you
Yeah.
go through to make you this person?" And, that's what I've spent my past few years becoming.
That is so amazing to me. First of all, you're young. I don't know how young you are, but you're young. You're younger than I am. And for you to have that kind of self-awareness to run towards that blows my mind. And that you did it on something that was amiss. Because most people would say, whew, good thing that didn't happen and move on with life and stay busy. But you allowed those feelings and those emotions to not only come, which is important in grief, but
Yeah.
to actually do something about it, to change you and to realize, oh, there's a gap in me, and then to go seek that out and fill that. I mean, that has to set you in the top tier of humanity. That's amazing, Colin. It's really great. And then obviously has served you as you have then had tremendous loss.
Mhm.
Wow. Do you
Yeah,
wanna talk
and I've
about
noticed
Leander?
we can. I've done that quite a bit recently.
Have you? Okay.
Uh, I'm open to it. I don't know that it would be the most meaningful to me for
Okay.
this conversation,
Sure.
but
Sure.
I'm open to it. I would be really interested in exploring for especially you have 10 kids,
Mhm.
6 of them are adopted, and I won't share your story for you, but you've experienced tremendous loss as well, and
Yeah.
it seems like you have managed to heal effectively and help others to heal effectively. So I'm interested to hear more about that story. I only know what I've just shared. That's it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I'm curious, and maybe you're too close to your son's death to be able to articulate this, but for me, when we had our stillborn, his name became a time word, and I wonder if
hmm,
that is the case for you.
like almost like before and after
Yeah.
this milestone.
Yes.
Yes.
And it our son's name was Oscar with a K, the Swedish version, and it just became before Oscar and after Oscar. And I I we actually had a son right before that. They would have been 14 months apart, and in my mind, they were just gonna be the best of friends, Oliver and
Mhm.
Oscar, and occasionally, somebody would call Oliver and say Oscar, which
Mhm.
they would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't wanna upset you." And to me, I was so thrilled to hear his name
Mhm.
in a living way, in a way that wasn't this time
Sure.
factor. It kind of gave him personality. That's something I've learned in talking with other people who've lost, is that it's so important to say that person's name. To say Leander and to say, he was a treasured, beloved son of yours, and his life mattered, and our son, Oscar, mattered, and it really shaped the trajectory. It massively impacted the trajectory of our lives,
Mhm.
um, and maybe that will be the case for you. It's like we collect these things that happen to us, and I thought that would become my thing, and I would really help people or do something in that. Actually, we healed through photography, and I had a friend who was like, "You should have a photography business." And I remember saying, "Over my dead body," but we did. We have for a couple years, we did portrait photography, and I went into hospitals and I took pictures of stillborn babies, thinking
Wow.
that this was gonna be helpful.
Mhm.
Um, I know what it did for me to have pictures of our son,
Yeah, it's
but
huge for us as well.
it ended up it was too much for me. It
Yeah.
was really hard. Now, in the moment, I had the strength, but when I came back to do the editing, I was a mess. I was just a wreck, and what I actually pivoted into was taking pictures of newborns, and that
Mhm.
really became a joyous thing,
Mhm.
and a healing piece of that. And I recently met a photographer just at a local coffee shop, and I said, "Hey, if you ever have a newborn session, I would just love to be there. Just love to be
Mhm.
hands-on, just that would give me great joy." But, um, I'm not doing that anymore, but it's interesting how some of those things they impact us. But
Yeah, it's completely changed my experience of life.
Mm.
I was sharing with a friend of mine yesterday that, it's like everything's just more intense.
Mm.
It's like I see your impressionist paintings that you did, by the way. You're very skilled.
Mm.
I
Thank you.
appreciate those. Um, but there's a lot of vibrance in your painting. The colors, you use strong colors. And yeah, my life now, the colors are stronger.
Mm.
It's like everything's more intense.
Mm. That's
I
so interesting, and
feel everything more.
I feel like you saying that, I feel like that is a direct result of the grief work that you've done,
Mhm.
because so
Yeah.
many people are trying to just they don't wanna feel it, and I think that's such a normal reaction. Something hard happens, something terrible, just devastating, like, no one can believe it, happens to you, and you don't wanna feel that. Who wants to sit in that? Nobody wants to. We all want comfort. We all want easy. But when life doesn't give us that, and we choose to do that grief work, then it's like what you said, everything comes up. Everything rises up in color, in vibrancy, in importance and value. And when you do the opposite and you stuff it, you end up numbing yourself with some kind of addictive form of something so that you don't feel that because we're so
Mhm.
afraid of that. When really, if we had leaned into it, it might open the door to some great living and great laying hold of things like color and vibrancy and joy.
Mhm.
It's like it's opposite, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've also noticed you mentioned seeking comfort and not wanting to feel things. Like,
Mm.
a shift for me has been I have a kind of paradoxical desire to experience things in their fullness, even if they're painful.
Mm.
Um, Comfort is wonderful, but I've come to recognize that peace and comfort are not the same thing, and that
Mm.
peace is not the absence of pain. It's the full engagement with what is without resistance to it. And
That's
that
quotable, by the way. That's great.
there's your soundbite YouTube or whatever.
It's really
Sure.
good. That's really good.
Um, but I'm a lot more present to the quote unquote negative emotions of my everyday experience,
Mm.
and I'm not afraid of them. That's I had a kind of surprising realization within a week of Leander's passing. I was like, I'm the most mentally healthy I've ever been in my life right now. I realized that. And it was because prior to Leander passing, I was terrified of that possibility.
Mm.
Even though we had no reason to expect it, it was completely unexpected and unpredicted.
Mhm.
Um, but I was terrified of that possibility and how would I respond in a situation like this and all those questions. And then after he died, it was like, well, I don't have that fear anymore because
Mm.
now I
Yeah.
know I know how I respond. I know what it's like, and I survived, and I'm surviving, and I'm still functional. And so then I was like, okay, well, I'm like I was before, but now I'm like that minus the fear and trepidation around engaging fully with negative emotions. And so
What a
now I
blessing.
have lots of negative emotions, but I I just sit with them and allow them to be and
Mm.
move, and I find peace in that instead of peace in or attempted peace, comfort in running away from it.
That's amazing. That puts you in a position you're not a victim. You're choosing things,
Mhm.
and you don't live in fear. To not live in fear, what a gift that is. I think every human would love to lay hold of what is it like to live fearless?
I wouldn't say fearless. I would say I have fear, but I'm not afraid of fear. Does that make
Okay.
sense? I
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
experience fear, but I allow myself to experience it. And when it comes up, it's like, "Oh, I'm afraid, and I'm feeling it." And there it is. That's what it is. And I can sit with that, and I can let it do its thing, and that's okay. Um, so it's not an absence of fear, it's just not being afraid of fear, you know, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. It's like, what's
Yeah,
that quote? Like, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." I don't remember who said it or what the context was, and I don't care, but it's
yeah.
the I found the more that I've thought about that, I recognize that oftentimes in the past, I have what I've really been afraid of is being afraid, and
Mhm.
that's like a it is a self-fulfilling prophecy and
Yes.
just exacerbates the problem and prevents moving forward.
Mm. I learned this through a lesson, a very painful lesson, um, but the lesson that I pulled out of it was that there's no purpose in me worrying about a future event because I don't know the strength that is going to be infused to me in that moment.
Mhm,
I don't know how God is gonna show up because I can't predict. And so when you are sitting in fear at point A about maybe point C, the the chance of you figuring out the actual circumstance to be afraid of is very low. And then you're not anticipating the way that angels and, all kinds of supernatural are going to flood you with all kinds of gifts that you don't know about. And so it's literally sucking the joy out of the moment, worrying about something that you can't possibly get it right.
mhm,
and and so I had a situation where um I did something that was so absolutely ridiculously impossible, and I was like, "Wow, I did that." And if I had known that I had to do that, I would have worried about that, and
yeah,
I couldn't have expected the strength that I did get, and I did that. So I've looked back at that and said, "Okay, I'm not gonna fear stuff," because you're right. I mean, fear not only it brings it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm gonna be afraid, so then you bring more
mhm,
negativity and you bring those fears on and you validate them.
mhm,
But then to live without that, to say, "I'm gonna live this moment and I'm gonna trust God for all my future moments, and He's been faithful to me in the past, and He's not changing, so I can't wait to see. I can't wait to see." There's something in the brain that fear and excitement are received in the same receptors, and so I have I've been told that breathing deeply when you feel fear, you can actually shift it into, "I'm so excited." Instead of I do this right before I go on a run or right before I get in the swimming pool to swim laps. I get
mhm,
fear, and I don't know, like, I could be afraid of maybe I'm not gonna be able to continue swimming as long as I want or running as long as I want, but to be able to just breathe deeply and change my verbiage in my mind and, in my actual words and say, "I'm so excited."
mhm,
It's amazing how that it just infuses you with power.
mhm.
Really crazy.
Yeah, I I do something a little different from I used to do what you just mentioned, the fear to excitement reframe, especially when I was about to do a sales call. I did a lot of sales.
Okay.
I don't do that, at least not the same way anymore, but, I would be afraid every time before a sales call. It's just
Mhm.
very intimidating to me, and so I would attempt to do that, like, tell myself, "I'm not afraid, I'm excited," and I would do things to, like, channel that.
Look at me. I'm excited.
And it kind of worked, and at this, because what you said, there's some very overlapping neurochemistry and pathways going on there.
Mhm.
I experience it a little differently now. It's like, okay, I'm afraid. I'm experiencing fear right now, and that's just data. It's like that's what it is. But it's the shift to the question of, um, okay, what am I going to do with that,
Mm.
and how am I going to respond to that? Um, am I willing to experience that fear and also take whatever the action is in front of me? Uh, because I realize if you transmute fear into excitement, then there's a you're still not you're not addressing fear. You're choosing to address something else at that
Mhm.
point. And now you're dealing with excitement instead of fear, and that may not always work. There might be times where that reframing like falls apart, and you're like, no, I'm just afraid. Frankly, I'm just
Mhm.
terrified.
Yeah.
And uh, so for me, it's been okay. I'm going to sit with fear as it is, experience it as it is, and know that I have the ability to take action when afraid, even if it's not excitement or something else. It's just that.
Mm.
Uh, and so building up a
Mm.
well of experiences of when I'm afraid, I can do what I choose to do, even in that. And maybe it might hinder me, maybe it might help me, but either way, I can still choose my response and how I move forward, and I don't have to suppress or ignore what I'm experiencing or pretend like it's something else.
That's great. It's is it called meta thinking? I feel like there's a word,
Metacognition,
metacognition.
it's the fancy
You're
word, yeah.
Yes, it is a fancy word, and I love it, and I couldn't think of it. But you're thinking about your thinking. You're conscious about what's taking place rather than
Mhm,
being a victim to it. And that is that is so key, I think, in living a powerful, power-filled life. I paint surfers all the time, and I just love the fact that the very same wave that can drown people, people get on it with a surfboard and ride it for fun. Like,
mhm.
that's incredible to me, and I feel like that's what you're doing, like, you're being willing to let the wave come, and you are the boss of that. Even though you are experiencing the fear, you're still thinking about the fact that this is an emotion, this is something I'm having, this it doesn't define me, because I feel like the 13-year-old version of myself, when I was afraid, I was choking on the wave, I was drowning. I wasn't able to see this as an experience that I'm about to have and it's gonna pass, and, like, I think that's really have you always been like that?
No, not at all.
Okay. So
No,
it's
no,
learnable.
yeah,
That's
absolutely. No, yeah, it's,
really encouraging.
I I shared this actually on the conversation I had before this one, but I had my mentor gave me an assignment to, because I said even up to 2 years ago, I would say, I'm just not a very emotional person.
Mm,
Um, and it's not that I dismissed them or thought they were bad or anything. It's just like I just genuinely don't really f get a lot of positive or negative, pretty neutral, slightly positive most of the time. Every once in a while, I'll have strong emotions, but they tend to be pretty subdued.
mm,
And, he he called bull crap on that and had me write a list of 200 positive and 200 negative feelings from the top of my head, like, without external reference, just write them, and I ended up writing 1,300, and I was which I was shocked by more than anyone. I was like, "I didn't even know there were 1,300 feeling," and there's more than that, I can tell you it's probably well over that in the English language, and what I started to notice is that as I was writing them, I would start to get these little phantom flickers of, like, I'd write, you know, angst, and then there'd just be, like, a little something, like, "Oh, well,
mm.
that's kinda interesting." I just started pay more attention to that, like, that metacognition, just paying attention to what was going on,
Yeah.
and I realized that as I was writing the words, I was activating the neural networks associated with that word, which also activated well, what is that? Like, physically, what is that? What is angst feel like? And I was starting to trigger those, and the more I paid attention to it, the more aware I became, the more differentiated it became, the more I was aware of the physical differences in
Mhm.
emotions, and that was honestly, I'd say that was the start of really kicking off a lot more emotional intelligence, ability to engage consciously, intentionally with those things, and realizing, I, even for those of us who maybe don't naturally or haven't been taught to notice emotions, that doesn't mean they're not there. And I've found that the more I've recognized that I'm not emotions, I have emotions, and that emotions are data, and that data is arguably the most concentrated and relevant form of information I have access to for anything that I do.
Hmm.
Um, I've started to just pay a whole lot more attention to them, allow them to come forward, to experience them, and I guess ride that wave, as you'd say, and attempt to do so with some skill and maybe even some flair sometimes. Like, okay, like, can I enjoy and skillfully navigate the experience of this complex cascade that's going through my body and my mind right now, and allow it to push me forward rather than pulling me under.
Mm.
And that's been a lot of my work personally on myself and working with others for the past couple years has just been figuring that out and
Mhm.
exploring that and realizing it's actually kind of an endless adventure to be had and that anyone can tap into. And you've got me off on this delightful little rabbit trail, and I've lost the thread of whatever we were.
I think that
Yeah,
work that you've done is part of why things are more colorful and more vibrant because
absolutely.
you're in tune with these these almost, vibrations that are here in the
Mhm.
world that we just totally tune out with our phones, with we're missing out on so much life because we're so distracting. We're so distracted. We're distracted by all the stuff, and you don't wanna think about your own life. I made myself fold my laundry last night without anything, and it
Oh,
was
man.
so interesting. I was so grateful that I did that because I remembered 2 things, that were just completely off in the far corners of the
Yeah,
cobwebs of my mind, and I didn't even know that I needed to think about them, but I was so grateful, and I went and I wrote them down. I had determined I was actually listening to Dan's podcast about sleep, and this was
mm,
about an hour and a half before I wanted to go to sleep, and so I was like, "I'm not gonna turn on a TV, I'm not
there we
gonna
go.
listen to a podcast, I am gonna stand here and fold this laundry," and I was so grateful that I did that, and then my temptation was to go and add these 2 things that I remembered on my computer, and I thought, "No, no, I'm gonna write them down on paper." It was so interesting. I think our society is so now this is real rabbit trail, but our society is so full of all these amazing leaps and bounds forward and AI and all this stuff that we can do. And yet, what we are desperately missing is quiet and exactly what you were sharing about feeling those feelings and allowing there's actually a lot of living that we're missing because we're not willing to be quiet. We're not willing to sit in meditation. I mean, there are the people that meditate and that are still and are quiet, but it is not the popular cultural thing. We want to be busy. We want to be seen and perceived as busy, not, oh, I'm quiet today.
Mhm, mhm.
It but there's something we're massively missing out on as humanity, as a whole, as we get more and more into all of the things that are available, these wonderful things that are available.
Are
But,
you willing to share what that looks like with your relationship with your children?
hmm, yeah, I mean, right off the bat, I just think of just playing games, card games, playing in the swimming pool with them, where we're not doing it around a movie or an episode of HGTV. Now we like to do that too, but um then to even taking that, like an HGTV episode, and then I go into my daughter's bedroom with them and like, "What would you think if we did this and this?" And, and just fun things to apply things. I don't know, getting that creativity. I'm a creative person. I don't operate without creativity. I have found I have to create in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And I think, encouraging that in my children is part of it. I think, playing in the pool, we're inventing some story that we're doing or, you know,
Mhm.
but the temptation I think as an adult is I just want to read my book. You
How
guys
how have
play and
you
I'll read my book.
how have you helped them, if you're willing to share, engage with emotions and life and what's happening now, especially after they lost their dad?
Yeah. The catastrophic loss. I think it's not like I'm sitting down and saying, "Okay, I have a plan, kids. This is how we're gonna do this." I think it's just living my life really authentically with them, not necessarily for them or for I'm not doing something in me for a outcome in them. Um, the sidebar that understanding. I mean, I've been parenting for 25 years.
Mhm.
Um, Understanding that behavior is really it's something that is reflecting something that's going on inside, as opposed to it's so easy to parent for behavior modification. I want you to act right. I want you to look good, be presentable. I want those things too, but to understand that behavior is really it's like an emotion, right? I mean, it's indicating something going on at the root. Um, but so I would say that just living authentically my life and crying when I need to cry, and I'm not afraid to cry in front of my children. They know that I cry, and when my husband was living, we were given his diagnosis, and they told us we had maybe 6 to 12 months together
Mhm.
left if he did treatment, and we were so blindsided by that, and we ended up getting 3 years, and I think in that time, we spent a lot of time being very honest and, talking about stuff. And we talked about death and we talked about, fear and we talked about why we don't need to fear death, why we don't need to fear what's coming. And living those they saw us cry and then they saw us laugh and we did so much laughing and we did so much living vibrantly. Um that I think, I haven't had to say, "Oh, this is something I'm doing for my children." It's just I'm just living my life with my children, and that's part of my story too, is that we did not try to hide the situation from our kids. In
Mhm.
fact, in the very first day that things came about, when my husband, suddenly couldn't speak and he was calling me by our daughter's name and he was completely confounded by what a blood pressure cuff did and how did that possibly work? And then they explain it to him and he asks it fresh all over again. Like he didn't
Mhm.
just ask that question. It was really a frightening day. And even though all of that happened and they immediately told me he had a mass in his brain, I chose to go get the kids out of school and it became a family. We went through it as a family. And so I think many people say, "Oh, I'm going to try to protect my children. I'm not going to allow them to be part of this." So I never had a curriculum for my kids. I was just living my life and that's how I continue to do it. I'm not trying to that would indicate that I'm far smarter, Colin, than I am. That I have some long range plan. I do have a long range plan for my kids, but I'm just living as authentically as I can and crying out when I need help and, that my help comes from the Lord. And so I model that for my kids and they know that that's where strength comes from. And whether they choose to live that way or not, that's their choice. And, I can't force them to make those choices, but my life of my own history of living in that way and then the place that I am, I I think that speaks a lot for for choosing to pull my strength from the Lord. Um, I have more joy than I ever have, which doesn't make sense in a typical if you just
Mhm.
look at it on paper. Wait, you're
Sure.
widowed and you have 10 kids and you have more joy than ever. It doesn't compute. But it does when you understand that I am pulling great joy from my relationship with God, which is absolutely blowing my mind that I can know the creator God. Like, that's what? It's amazing. And it actually is amazing on a daily basis.
Mhm. I the your comment about experiencing more joy now, I that makes sense to me. It's like, again, that intensification of life. It's like um, I forget, I heard someone talk about this at one point. They said that this was before I had any kids, but that when you have kids, the highs are higher, the lows are lower, and I think that's true with anything that brings you more present to what you're experiencing, anything that causes you to engage more fully and more deeply with life.
Mhm.
Just well, now you get more of the spectrum of what can be experienced, the highs, the lows, and, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me that you'd have
Mhm.
access to more joy now. I'm I'm just genuinely curious, and I have no idea what it's like to raise and parent 10 like, the 10 kids just blows my mind. I would love to have that experience someday, but doing that on your own, and perhaps you're not doing it on your own. I don't know. Tell me more about what is that like? What has that been like?
Do you mean parenting, like, a large family or specifically as a widow?
Well, just your experience. Yeah, like, I know that's a super vague question, but I don't even know what question to ask.
Yeah.
I don't understand that experience, and
Mhm.
I can't conceptualize how to, like, even logistically to handle that.
Yeah. Well,
10 people that you're in charge of and
yeah.
all of that, like
Well, it's getting easier because those 10 people are getting older
yeah.
and 2 of them are married, and
Yeah, that helps.
I only have 6 of them living here, so and
Still, even 6.
only 5 of them are still in school, so
You say 6 as if it's a small number of kids.
it is for me,
I
so
know, which is just bizarre.
I go back and I look at some videos just on my phone and I'm amazed, like, "Man, that was hard." That was so hard when my husband was diagnosed, they were ages 18 down to 3. That was so much action. There were so many moving parts and, 6 of them were they have brokenness at the core of them because of the way that their lives began and they lost their first families. And not to mention, a lot of them have special needs. And so the very factor of what was going on when we got this diagnosis, it was absolute craziness. I had 6 kids on IEPs, which I guess with a 3-year-old you probably don't know an IEP is an individual
Yeah.
education plan, yeah, and it requires all kinds of meetings and all kinds of things. I had 6 of those. And then, they were having surgeries and different therapies and different medications and it was a lot to keep it going and to keep them all fed and to keep them all in clothing and to keep them in all of their extracurricular things and it was a lot. It was a lot. When Brian was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer from day 1. It was like, "This is really bad." And then after he had his craniotomy and then after the pathology came back, I think it was a 14-day wait or 7-10-day wait, doesn't even matter, it was a long wait, and they finally gave us it in writing that he had the worst of the worst, and then his DNA that they extracted from the tumor said that it was the most resistant to treatment. I mean, it was just the worst possible thing. It was just so overwhelming because we had already so much already going on that it really felt like, "Wait, what? We can't do this." But there was no choice. We had to do it. We were already in it. Now we did get rid of our cow. which sounds really funny. But my husband loved cows, and he had worked milking cows in the past, and he had done artificial insemination breeding of cows. And so we had our own cow at our house, and she had a baby, and he was out there milking her. And, the kids had great experiences with it, but the cow was the first to go. So in
What
order
was
to,
next to go? What was
yeah.
the second, third? There had to be other things, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally. I think honestly, it sounds funny, but my own sanity, I really do wonder how I did it back then. I journaled. I have journaled for since I was in college, so I have years and years and years of journals, and I kept journaling through that time frame. So I could go back and even when I have looked back and I've written down all the things that I was thinking about, and I'm just like, wow, how in the world did I do this? Um, which is actually why I think when my husband had those really frightening, like, where he couldn't talk and he was really wrestling with things, and I thought he's having a meltdown. He's having a mental breakdown here because everything's just been too much. But that wasn't what was happening. He
Mhm.
really did have a diagnosis, but I'm struggling to remember your original question here. I guess it was about living with all these kids, but
Yeah, I was like, what was it like? What were the defining features?
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned your faith. Has that always been the source of strength? Were there other things like
Yeah, I would definitely say my faith has always been a strength. And every time we lost 3 babies across our family building years, and every time it would drive my faith deeper. And it was actually when Oscar died. Oscar was our 3rd baby to die. Um, I had lost at 5 months a twin,
Mhm,
lost him at 5 months, and then delivered her his twin, who is now 23 years old. Um, and then I lost a baby while we lived overseas. And then to lose Oscar at full term was such a shock. But that was really, it took all of that for me to hammer out the truth that God is good. No matter what my circumstances are, no matter what my circumstances say, God is good apart from that. And that was hard. That was hard work to figure that out. So yes, my strength has always come from my faith, but it got deeper and deeper and deeper every time I had a hardship. Um, I think we had experienced other families, actually just at a church where they had all these kids, and both of us we really thought it was really cool, and so
mhm,
we had wanted to do that, and so we built this large family, and we would never have adopted if we didn't lose Oscar, and so I I have a real, kind of a guiding rule with myself that I don't ask God why, because I know that I won't be able to comprehend all of his reasons. He's way more complex than me. Thank God that he is, because that would be really frightening if we could figure him out. But
mhm,
I know that I can ask why, but I don't think I will be given an answer, or I just don't have the capacity to comprehend. So I have instead asked the question, "What do you want me to know right now?" And that seems to be a nice little tidbit, and I get those answers really well, and that's, like, enough for me to do right now. Um, but I said that at the front end, but then I wanna go back and say, I can see some really good things that came out of Oscar's death, and one massive one is that 6 more children have a family that wouldn't have had families because we wouldn't have pursued that. We were actually headed to India at the time. We were gonna go live our lives as missionaries to India, and suddenly this happens, and, the people that we were working with said, "You cannot go to India. There are dead babies laying in the street. How are you gonna handle that?" I was like, "Not very well." And
mhm.
so we didn't go. And then it was really after, I had a final fourth living biological child 2 years after Oscar, and it was after her birth that my husband was like, "Would you be interested? Would you be willing to consider international adoption? Because I've been learning about all these orphans all around the world, and, who's gonna step up and take care of them?" And, I mean, it didn't take me long. I think he called on a Monday, and we were filing paperwork on Wednesday, so we were quick. And I like that about the way we worked together. Brian and I worked together very, like, just if we felt that God was maybe calling us into something, we did it right away. We didn't, like, sit and think about it for 6 months. That was not our way of doing things, and I don't think we would have had this abundant life if we had. Um, we brought home 6 kids in 5 years. That's
Wow.
crazy,
It
and
is.
we didn't have the money for that. We fundraised and worked my tail off to do that, and all the wonderful people that supported us bringing these children home. And then so it was a calling, I think, to do that. It was a massive pivot from what our plans were, and, I'm still living it. I'm still parenting these children.
Mhm.
The kids that I have in school, with the exception of one, our final biological child, they're all our adopted kids. And, I'm going to continue parenting here until I'm 60 years old well, I will always be a parent, but I will still have a child in school until I'm 60. Like, who does that? I was talking to my daughter this week. She's here visiting. She just got married. And she was like, "Mom, there's a reason that you feel tired. I mean, if you think about it, you're gonna actively parent for 31 years." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." Very overwhelming. When I think about, some people have a child and then they're not done at 18, but, you think, "Okay, I'm actively gonna put into your life for 18 solid years, and then, I'm gonna support you as you go off to whatever higher education and learning you wanna do." But
Mhm.
the intense times are gonna be these 18 years, and to realize that I have compounded it that much. I mean, that's like the underbelly of this, "Oh, I want a large family," that I never thought of. But again, I have the strength that I need for it in the moment, and I never, never, never thought that I would have to do it alone, but I am. You asked, you didn't know if I was doing it alone. There is no new husband, and it's me, and my 23-year-old is living here she's kinda changing her pathway of what she's doing, so she's here and she's helpful, but it's not the same as having your life partner. It's really not, and I miss him so much, but I have what I drew from his strength, I now do that with God, which is kind of crazy, but it turns out God's a good parent. He's actually better than I ever was, and better than Brian and I were together, and he has all these creative ideas, and his ideas work. We had ideas, and they didn't often work. Sometimes they had messy consequences. I mean, that's why children go to therapy, right?
Mhm.
The parents are doing the best that they can in the moment, but when I don't have that, I would love to use that. "Go ask your dad." I miss saying that so much. It would give me a mental pause, and then he would do it back to me. "Go ask your mom." I don't know, maybe, is it Elias? Maybe he's
Mhm.
not old enough to start doing that.
Yeah, yeah. A
But
little bit here and there.
yeah.
You said at one point that you asked God. I think the question was, what do you
What do you want me to know right now?
want me to know? Oh, I was gonna say need. What do you want me to know right now? And then you get an answer. How do you experience that answer?
Mm. Well, it's different for every situation. I think it might be easier to explain it with some of the kid stuff, or even just, like, house repair. Like, I literally have had God help me fix a freezer before. Um, I I had been experiencing him helping me with kids, and he would put I would s I instead of where I would maybe take a problem that one of the kids did, maybe I discovered the kid did something, like, ugh, I hate that. I really want them to come and tell me things. Tell me beforehand, or right after it happens. But if I discover something that a kid has done, and then I would go to Brian and say, "Can you believe this is what so and so did?" And then the two of us would go back and forth with, "Oh my goodness," kind of the shock value and what are we going to do with this kid? And all right, now we got to think of a plan. How are we going to bring some kind of, you know, change in this child? What should the change correction be? So we come up with something. Well, I didn't have that. And not to mention, we were all grieving. And so I would have something go wrong because things don't stop going wrong just because your husband passes away. I'd have something go wrong and I would immediately say, God, I don't know what to do. What do I do? And he would just drop an idea in my mind. And the idea wouldn't work for the next time, which I think is really cool because God wants relationship with us. And so he didn't give me one formula that would work forever. It's one day at a time, one moment at a time. And so I would get an idea and I would go try it and it would work. And I'd be like, what? My gosh. Like, oh, I guess you do kind of know what you're doing. And so those things would happen. And the story of this freezer. So Brian died in April. And I think it was probably a year and a half later. My freezer had been leaking at the corner at the bottom, and I did nothing. I that was kind of his department, and I didn't do that. So I would just put a towel there and just kind of mop it up. I never really I just didn't wanna go there. I had so many other things flying around in my life that fixing a freezer when I could just stick a towel there was working. So
Mhm.
I have a dear friend who is actually coming again soon, and she came to visit me then, and I don't even know what made me sometimes when she's with me, we tackle things that I've been putting off, and somehow the idea of this broken freezer came up. And I said, okay, well, let's look at it. So I opened it. It was one of those half, like you open both
Yeah.
sides of it. Down at the bottom, the whole bottom bin was full of like 12 inches of ice because it had been
Mhm.
dripping and leaking and freezing for a year and a half. Now, my husband would just absolutely croak to know that I didn't do anything about it. I didn't call anybody. He's like, I'm sure he's like, how could you possibly? Anyway, I so we got on YouTube. It was like 11 at night. We got on YouTube and we looked up different things to fix it. So we try to do this. Of course, we roll up our sleeves late at night and we're getting in there and we've pulled the thing out. We're oohing and eyeing at all the gross, disgusting things behind the refrigerator and we're trying stuff and nothing is working. We've exhausted all of the YouTube videos about how to fix this. And I was so upset because we had burned a couple hours and I was going to have to call a repairman. And I sat there frumping in the back of the fridge. And I was like, wait a second. Wait a second. Jesus, do you know how to fix a freezer? Second. Okay. Okay. So I just prayed. I'm like, Lord, I just want you to put an idea in my mind to fix this freezer because I know that you know how to fix this. You know how to do this. Just show me. And I did. I got an idea. I got a picture in my head. And it was different. And so I went to the front of the freezer and I stuck my hand up in there and I don't remember the details anymore. But I fixed the freezer. And I went, "What? Oh my gosh." Like, and so what I learned, Colin, is that there are heavenly solutions for every single earthly problem. But God is not a pushy God, and he's not gonna, like, force you to take the heavenly solution. He's gonna let you struggle and try as long as you want. So, what I learned from that is, like, "Oh, I wanna go there right away. I don't want I don't wanna waste any time with my earthly attempts because I can't see what God can see. God can see all of it. God knows all of it. He has all the knowledge." And, like, I'm sure it was kinda giggly for God to hear me say, "Do you know how to fix a freezer?" Like, "Oh, little Amy, of course I do," you know? Um, but I have experienced that over and over and over, and so now I'm in a place where something goes wrong in my life, and I'm just thanking God for it because I know that I'm gonna get heavenly solutions. I know that I'm gonna get some kind of pathway forward that I wouldn't have envisioned, and it works. I just had this happen. My daughter got married maybe 3 to 4 weeks ago now, and the week that we were leaving for the wedding, my transmission on my handicap vehicle went out. Like, I
Mhm.
couldn't drive this car. And the temptation to fear or the temptation to worry, "How is this gonna work? Wait, I need to leave on Saturday. It's Tuesday, and my transmission is out." Like, that's not a good thing. And in my head, I thought maybe you could just order on Amazon a 2014 transmission, have it shipped, and somebody would come put it in. I didn't
Yeah.
realize there weren't shelves of transmissions, I don't know this stuff. But, I decided in fact, I came to dinner that night, and I said, "Hey, kids, we have an awesome opportunity to thank God in advance for how he's gonna solve our problem." And they're like, "What's our problem?" I'm like, "Our handicap van doesn't work." And they're like, I don't think they believed me. I don't think they believed me because I was so, like, cheery about it. I'm like, "Really? We have this amazing opportunity. We're gonna see God do something big," because I have no ever living idea how to fix a transmission. I don't know. We moved here a year ago. I don't have car repair people. I don't have transmission people. And I learned that those are two different things, that you need a transmission person. They have to take it out and rebuild it because you can't just click and order a new transmission. Um, and that's what he did. He did amazing things through that. And I bypassed the fear, I bypassed the stress, I bypassed, "Oh my goodness, how am I gonna get us to the wedding? This is how am I gonna afford do I have to fly us there? What do I do about the wheelchair? How are we gonna" I didn't
Mhm.
do any of that. I just I thanked him. I'm like, "Thank you because I know you're gonna do something." And that was the first thing was putting somebody in my mind to call about who would I call about my transmission. And so I actually didn't even text her. I called her and she picked up, which is crazy in this day and age. She picked up and she had somebody and she told me and I called them and they said, "Yeah, bring it in." So I drove on the highway at 20 miles an hour with my lights blinking cuz my car wouldn't shift. And I got it in there and they said, "Yeah, we can maybe get to it next week." I was like, "Oh, I need that Saturday." I'm like, "Yeah, we can't do that." And again, I had that opportunity like, okay, I could flip out. Nope, I'm
Mhm.
going to thank God. Okay, God, you must have a different idea. What is it? And again, I got another idea of somebody who I had sold some of our eggs. We have chickens. We sold eggs to somebody and she had in passing told me that they were about to deliver their car because they rent their cars out. And so that memory came to me, so I called her, and she happened to have a big Suburban that we could drive. Anyway, the story goes on, but the beauty of what happened even the week of the wedding because of my transmission going out
Mhm.
was amazing. Gifts amazing that I never would have dreamed. But I don't think I would have seen them as gifts had I freaked out at the front end. And
Yeah.
had I seen that transmission as I have to solve this.
Mhm.
So the perspective that I don't have to solve this. I just have to ask the one who already has a solution. I really believe that God, God is on his throne and he's looking at the whole timeline and he knows how everything's going to go and he knows the solutions and they're all every problem has a solution and there's
Mhm.
more than one solution. But I have I don't think we're not taught this. We're not taught to like, hey, you don't have to actually figure it out. And
Yeah.
man, there's a lot of freedom in that, and there's a lot of joy that comes in that walking that adventure of like, "Oh my goodness, we get to rent this car," and, they cut the price for us and, just some really sweet things, and it was a great deal, and then I realized, "Oh my goodness, how grateful I am that my transmission in this car died when it did. If it had died after we started the trip and I would have been stranded somewhere, I mean, wow, all of a sudden, I was so full of gratitude that my transmission failed. Like, this is the best thing. This is truly the best thing, and now it's fixed, and I'm back to driving it. And I just refused to worry about how I'm gonna get the money. I'm just not gonna worry about it because, I mean, so I am moving through the world with that kind of a perspective, and I have all the joy, all the it's not that I don't get sad, because it was just my birthday last week, and I was really sad that my husband wasn't here. And so it's not ignoring the grief or the emotions, but it's just realizing, "Oh, I think we're looking at this wrong. I think we're looking at a lot of things wrong."
Mm. And the idea that when something happens that you don't understand how to, like how you would, if there's a problem that you don't understand how you would solve, the liberation that comes from taking the perspective that you're not actually responsible for solving it, or like you don't have to come up with a solution, even if you play a part in implementing a solution. Like you don't have to know all the answers. That is, seems like that opens you up to a lot more possibilities, and that openness. It's like the knock and the door will be answered type of thing. It's I when you were talking about that, I got this image in my head of someone in a room. It, there's a closed door, and they sit in the room just crying and screaming and being so frustrated that they can't get out of the room without ever looking up to see the door or knock on it or bother doing anything, just sitting there wallowing in the frustration of their experience, not knowing how. And,
Yeah.
that was the image that came into my head of
Hmm.
you are open to the possibility that the solution could come from outside of you rather than
Mm.
having to originate from your own
Yeah.
intelligence or
Yeah, 'cause I'm
something
not
like
really
that.
very intelligent. And that's the greatest thing is I don't
Intelligence is
have to be.
overrated anyway.
I don't have to be. I just have to be really connected to somebody who is intelligent
Right,
and
yeah.
who has great intelligence, and then the wisdom to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, like curiosity and willingness and openness and wonder,
Mm.
and there are so many things that are more valuable than intelligence. Well,
Uh,
Amy, I would enjoy talking more. We are 7 minutes over the time we scheduled,
okay.
and in case anyone listens to this conversation, is there anything that you'd like to share or say to anyone who might listen?
Mm.
I don't
Just
know if you invite people to reach out to you or if you have
yeah, I
anything like that.
do.
Yeah,
I
okay.
do. And I'm glad you said that because I was thinking more like recap because it's been such a great conversation. It's been
People wanna
I think
recap,
it's
they can just listen to it again. Like, just keep
yeah,
listening.
they can just listen again on double time.
There you
I
go.
think yeah, I the conversation that we had was similar to things that I do, in my work and Walk the Red, where I'm coming alongside people that are in the middle of suffering and in the middle of problems that they don't know how to solve and helping them with perspective, mindset shift, helping them with stress management. My book that I wrote, Navigating Goodbye, has a bunch of shortcuts in it for people who are dealing with terminal illness. Um, I think Walk the Red is more than just helping someone with a diagnosis navigate those days until death. It's really living a power-filled life, living a joy-filled life in spite of hardship and pain. So, yeah, they can find me at walkthered.com.
The Superhuman Academy podcast is hosted by Collin Jewett and designed and edited by Army Cinco, with original music by Joshua Schunig and voiceovers by Corey Page Schunig. That's me. You can find past episodes and resources, as well as access to the ever-growing Superhuman Academy community at superhumanacademy.com. If you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice.